In 1942, British scientists from the Porton Down Science Park tested an experimental bioweapon in Scotland's remote and picturesque Gruinard Island. A highly virulent anthrax strain was chosen to analyze its side effects and potentially slow down Germany, but the trial spun out of control and threatened the entire United Kingdom for half a century. While most of the tests were kept in the utmost security, a film, declassified in 1997, showed the horrific lengths to which the British government was willing to go in order to defeat the Nazis. Operation Vegetarian. As Adolf Hitler terrorized the world in the early 1940s, many European nations were either neutral or under his control. With a seemingly impending invasion, the British brainstormed every conceivable way to defeat him, including the possibility of resorting to biological warfare. Thus, in 1942, Prime Minister Winston Churchill contacted the top-secret military research facility of Porton Down and was referred to Dr. Paul Fields, its biology department director. Churchill then assigned Dr. Fields with a particular task: finding a new chemical innovation to hinder the thriving German industry. Fields immediately got to work, and soon developed a plan to deploy a chemical weapon against ordinary German civilians. It involved an anthrax-contaminated cattle dietary supplement called cattle cakes that would be airdropped by British aircraft onto German fields. With Operation Vegetarian, the cakes would destroy the meat supply chain, and the ingestion of said meat would cause a nationwide anthrax outbreak, spiking the mortality rate insurmountably. Anthrax. Anthrax, first used as a weapon in World War I by Nordic rebels against the Imperial Russian Army in Finland, is one of the most known and feared biological warfare agents. Classified as an infectious disease, the horrible and painful symptoms of anthrax poisoning in humans can take up to 2 months to appear. When left untreated, anthrax spreads rapidly throughout the body with a very high mortality rate. The Prime Minister loved the idea and ordered the execution of Dr. Fields' plan as soon as possible. The scientists then began making the linseed-based laced cakes, with a production goal of 5.3 million by April of 1943. If successful, the plan could even end the war and Germany itself, as anthrax spores remain alive in the soil for up to a century, rendering the territory uninhabitable for generations. Knowing that the anthrax bacteria were highly resilient, the War Office needed to find a remote and uninhabited lot of land to test the cattle cakes. They found the ideal location in the northwest Highlands of Scotland, with vast mountainous terrain and deep harbors. Gruinard, a small oval-shaped island, was known for its remarkable nature and beauty, and has been described by many fiction authors as the loveliest of all the Highland blocks. As far back as the 1920s, the island had belonged to the Eileen Durack estate, whose heir's husband, Colonel Peter Dunphy, was a close friend of Churchill. The fate of the beautiful island was now sealed, and the government subsequently acquired Gruinard for £500. Base X. The last stage of Dr. Fields' research was to test the weapon's lethality, its resiliency under heat and pressure detonation, and its effect on livestock. Consequently, from 1942 to 1943, the British team of scientists tested the effects of anthrax-laced cattle cakes off the coast of Gruinard Bay, which soon became known as Base X. Assisted by the Royal Navy, the first test subjects arrived on Gruinard Island in close to 100 ships, where the animals were tethered down in groups and placed into exposure crates, covered in cloth to prevent direct contact infections. The results were unequivocal, the virus worked quickly, and it was also concluded that the anthrax spores would remain in the Gruinard soil for decades. More tests were performed within a year, with a total of 22 anthrax bombs that released 300,000 billion anthrax spores. Some of Operation Vegetarian's experiments were captured in 16mm color film by American observer Lieutenant Calderon Howe of the U.S. Navy, then serving with the Special Projects Division of the Army Chemical Warfare Service at Porton Down, England. The Biological Research Development at Porton Down then created a film, which was declassified in 1997, making the length of the experiments available to the public. Fortunately, the weapons were never deployed. Pushback. The idea was for Operation Vegetarian to be used only if Germany made the first move in terms of biological warfare. However, by the spring of 1944, when the 5 million cattle cakes were finally ready, the war had turned decisively against the Nazis. With Operation Overlord on June 6, 1944, the Normandy landings finally allowed the Allied forces to take the advantage in the European theater. Additionally, after a much-needed assessment on the dissemination of anthrax spores, the English scientists determined that the risk of the virus spreading back to their own soil was too significant. As such, Dr. Field's operation was shelved, and in 1945, millions of produced cakes set to be disseminated around Germany were destroyed using an incinerator. Despite Operation Vegetarian never being green-lighted, the tests proved so effective that they caused irreversible damage in the country. Quarantine. After World War II ended in 1945, and life slowly returned to normal, the previous Gruinard owners asked for their island back. However, the War Office admitted that the contamination was so severe that the entire island had to be quarantined, and the government would own the territory until it was fit for life and habitation. From 1946 to 1968, Porton Down's microbiological research establishment tested the island for contamination, initially believing the anthrax spores could remain dormant for 10 years. That turned into 20, and then some more. After years of continuous testing, the researchers never detected a significant reduction in contamination levels, and by 1971, they determined that while there were no longer live anthrax spores on the surface, the soil was still infected 6 inches underground. As such, trespassers were forbidden from entering the island, and the government placed signs on the coast warning visitors about the virus. Still, the signs were not precisely effective, and in 1981, an anonymous group of rumored locals who were tired of living near a dangerous site demanded that the island be decontaminated. The group, which used the term Operation Dark Harvest, suggested that the British government should decontaminate the island by burying the infected soil under concrete and other materials, or else remove it from Gruinard and bury it somewhere else. Other suggestions included soaking the entire territory in a potassium permanganate solution or raising the temperature to 1,000 degrees Celsius for 2 minutes in order to extinguish the remaining live spores. Claiming to have 300 pounds of soil from the island, the anonymous group threatened the government with purposely distributing it in critical locations around the country, blurring the lines between protest and bioterrorism. Dark Harvest even sent one 10-pound package to Porton Down, and when tested, the soil was found to contain anthrax spores. Meanwhile, another package was delivered to a Conservative Party event, but that was not contaminated. Whether by choice or by pressure from the anonymous group, the British government finally started a formal cleanup effort in 1982. Thus, 196 hectares of topsoil were removed, and the remaining dirt was sprayed with a formaldehyde solution diluted in seawater. To test the long-term consequences, a flock of sheep was left behind in Gruinard, and 4 years later, they were found healthy and breeding. After a 48-year-long quarantine, Gruinard Island was officially declared decontaminated in April of 1990, and the warning signs were removed. Thank you for watching our video. Don't forget to hit the bell icon to be the first to know about our newest content. And for more intriguing historical anecdotes, please follow all of our Dark Documentaries channels. Stay tuned.